All right, hello everybody and welcome to the Strong National Museum of Play's 2019 Women in Games celebration. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Lisa Feinstein and I'm the Vice President for Institutional Advancement here at the Strong. And along with a lot of hard work from Shannon Simons and Kathy DeBellis and the rest of our team, I co-chair our Women in Games initiative and put this event together. In 2017, the Strong launched our Women in Games initiative to build upon the museum's already impressive collection of artifacts and materials that tell the story of the important contributions of women to this pivotal industry. Today, our Women in Games initiative has 4 driving goals: to collect, preserve, and interpret the often untold history of women in games, to highlight and share women's contributions through exhibits, educational events like this one, and online materials, to provide historical context for those contributions, and ultimately, perhaps most importantly, to inspire young girls, women, and other underrepresented populations to confidently play games and confidently pursue careers in games and technology. Because at the Strong, we believe in the power of play. And we believe that all children, in fact, all people, should be encouraged to play confidently and to create confidently. And that is why our theme for this year's celebration is Create. Tonight's panel features women who have created and continue to create groundbreaking games. Women who create businesses from the ground up. Women who create awareness, and women who create opportunities for others. Women who create socially conscious brands. Women who create iconic characters and new voices. And women who quite literally create new worlds and new ways to look at our world. Tonight, we hope that each of you finds inspiration through their stories and through our Women in Games exhibit. As we work to share the story of women in games, everyone at the Strong is very grateful for the support of our community and the support of the video game industry, without whom this event would not be possible. We're proud to partner with leaders in the industry who entrust the museum to preserve, interpret, and share their history. And we are very grateful for the sponsors and partners who help to make this event possible. Before we begin, I'd like to invite the Strong's President and CEO, Steve Dubnyk, to the stage to talk about all that we do here to promote inclusivity, creativity, and the power of play. Steve Dubnyk.
Thanks, Lisa, and thank you all for being here with us tonight. So the Strong National Museum of Play is the world's only collections-based history museum dedicated to the study of play and its impact on human culture. But as this museum has changed over time, so have the ways that people play. A decade ago, in 2009, recognizing that video games were quickly evolving into our era's most dominant form of play, the Strong established our International Center for the History of Electronic Games, or ICHEG as we call it. Under the leadership of Dr. John Paul Dyson, JP, ICHEG has become the international leader in preserving and interpreting the history and impact of electronic games, all within the broader context of the history of play. Our Women in Games initiative is one of ICHEG's key components, operating alongside the Strong's other internationally recognized programs related to video games. We hold and care for the world's largest and most comprehensive collection of video games and video game-related artifacts. Ever growing, our collection of more than 60,000 video game-related artifacts include the world's largest public collection of Japanese language games, the corporate records of the Atari coin-op division, and an incredible assemblage of artifacts that tells the story of women and other underrepresented groups in the industry, and much, much more. We're also the home to the World Video Game Hall of Fame, which recognizes iconic games that have had a broad geographical reach and have influenced industry and culture. But in addition to the World Video Game Hall of Fame and collecting, our ICHEG team develops exhibits, produces game saves at the Strong on Twitch, conducts and encourages writing and research about the significance of electronic games, presents at national and international video game and play-related conferences. But all of that programming, collecting, and exhibit making take up a lot of space and a lot of resources. And that's one of the reasons we're currently expanding. This is what the museum looks like today. It's 285,000 square feet on nearly 7 acres of land, spanning more than 3 city blocks. But however large we are today, we're running out of space. When you arrive tonight, you may have noticed a massive 5-story parking garage that's under construction in our backyard. Here's what the parking garage is going to look like when it's complete. But there's a lot more that's happening here. The parking garage is just phase 1 of a much larger project. In addition to that 1,000-car parking garage, which we'll just start using in just 12 days, over the next 2 years, we're also building a 90,000 square foot museum expansion, which will feature 2 expansive exhibit galleries dedicated to video games, and will also become the new permanent home to the Women in Games exhibit. But again, there's a lot more. You might have noticed when you came in, there are new apartment buildings that are being built next to us. That's because the expanding museum will serve as the centerpiece of all new neighborhood of play, a vibrant, walkable, play-themed neighborhood that will attract guests, scholars, gamers, and industry leaders from around the world. This year, in 2019, Strong's going to welcome more than 600,000 visitors through our doors. After the expanding museum and the neighborhood of play is complete in the summer of 2022, we plan to welcome nearly 1 million people each year from across the country and from around the globe. So there's a lot happening here, and we're grateful for guests like you and the industry leaders like you who support the Strong and all that we do. But I know you're not really here to listen to me, so let's get started. So I'm going to introduce Keisha Howard, and Keisha is someone that Lisa Dondaglo and I met at the GamesBeat conference in Los Angeles less than a year ago, and we saw her moderate a panel and a conversation with the president of the ESA at that time, and we thought what a dynamic, wonderful moderator she is, and we said we need to get her here. And so we had the opportunity to meet her and to invite her here, and she is here tonight. She is an entrepreneur, she's a futurist, and to put it mildly, a video game enthusiast. In 2009, she founded Sugar Gamers and what began as a women's advocacy and networking group eventually blossomed into an organization that advocates for all people who are underserved or underrepresented in video games and geek culture. She's committed to empowering women, minorities, and students as a mentor, speaker, and an influencer. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our moderator for this evening, Keisha Howard.
Thank you so much, Steve. I am floored to be here. How excited are you all to be here today? You can't be more excited than I am right now. I have been a lifelong gamer. I've been a gamer for 25 years. So to be here today with, and we're going to speak to these women who have shaped my world from playing the games I've played, like The Sims and Halo and Crash Bandicoot and Spider-Man. All of these women have contributed to the video game industry in ways that I've only dreamed of as a kid. So to get to this place and to be at the museum today means so much to me, from the evolution of how the narrative of the video game industry has worked. And there used to not be a lot of discussions about women in games in a very productive manner, and now we're here today speaking to so many amazingly accomplished, talented women. So let's get started. Before we welcome our first speaker to the stage, I would also like to welcome all the friends and families of our speakers who are with us today. And we'd also like to thank Reiko, sorry, you're going to have to forgive me, Ninomiya of Nintendo, and Raiming Poon from Exola, who will be joining us for student roundtables tomorrow. So thank you so much for being here. Tonight, we're going to start off with each of our featured speakers presenting a micro talk about the act of creating. And each of our speakers will share a unique perspective on the creative process, which inspires them to create, and what other aspects of creativity they're including in that whole process. After the talks, we'll bring our guests back to the stage for a panel discussion, so get your questions ready, because I'm pretty sure that you'll have plenty. We'll have a panel discussion about the video game industry and the challenges faced by women, the broader topics of inclusivity and diversity, and of course, we're going to continue talking about the creative process. That's when we'll open it up to the questions from you guys, and from both here at the Strong and the fans from all over the nation, and people who are watching on the Twitch and our other online channels. So let's get started. Our first guest is Jacinda Chew. Sorry, I'm a little nervous because, I mean, I am so excited to be around these women. Like, this is like a lifelong dream of mine to be around the creators of my favorite games. So again, Jacinda has been in the video game industry for nearly 20 years. Currently, she serves as the studio art director at Insomniac Games. She enjoys working in both stylized and realistic styles, and is particularly proud of art directing games including Ratchet & Clank, A Crack in Time, Sunset Overdrive, and of course, Marvel's Spider-Man. With more people than ever enjoying video games, Jacinda believes strongly in promoting diversity and inclusion in both games and in the workplace. So please, please give a warm welcome to Jacinda Chew.
Mic was off. Oh, geez. I thought I sounded pretty loud to my own ears, so let me start over. So, people always ask how we create games at Insomniac, and I always have a really hard time answering that question because it's such a big question. So I always end up defaulting to the different stages of post-production, or pre-production, production, and post-production. But that never really seems like an adequate answer because you can just go on the internet and find the answer. And then inevitably, people always ask me the following, which is, how do we make decisions when we create a game? And who has final say when we create games? And it dawned on me that people weren't really asking me how to execute on a game. They really wanted to know how to start the creation process. So, when we create games, we're creating two things. We're creating the team and the game itself. And you can see the relationship between the two from this image. Each project developed at Insomniac Games has a core decision-making group. And on Spider-Man, it consisted of me, the art director, the lead project manager, the story lead, the creative director, the animation director, and the game director. And now, I'd like to say that our teamwork was magical, and that we've been in the honeymoon phase ever since. But that's not true. Just like any relationship, you really have to work hard to create a good team dynamic, no matter how good you are individually. People aren't perfect, so the creation process isn't perfect. It's messy. So going back to the question of who had final say? Well, nobody had final say. If we couldn't agree on something, we would get into a room and figure it out. And it wasn't about who had the best idea, but what made the best game. And not listening to one another and not making a decision was not an option. It was part of the job. And with each major decision we made, our trust and respect for one another grew. And then that's how we create games and create teams that create games. So, back to the other part of creating a game, it's the game itself. And there's a couple things we do at the beginning of every project. And on a game like Spider-Man, we had to obviously research the topic. So one of the first things we did was we played past Spider-Man games. And then we also played games that inspired us. And of course, we read Spider-Man comics. Lots and lots of comics. The other thing we had to consider were our team's strengths. The Insomniac team is good at combat and storytelling. And then we'd also recently finished a game called Sunset Overdrive, which had a hero who had to traverse really quickly from building to building. And this newly acquired skill actually transferred over really well to a game like Spider-Man, where the hero had to web sling really quickly from building to building. The other thing that we always do is just R&D. So even if you don't know what the story is or you don't know what the gameplay is, you can always do R&D. And R&D for us is really about answering questions that we have or working on things that we don't already have. So for example, on Spider-Man, we had never created a game that had a hero who had to swing from a web. So that was one of the first things we worked on, were really just the web mechanics. Combat was also another area where we did R&D. Even though we are normally good with combat, we are normally well known for our over-the-top weapons, and we didn't rely so much on melee. A hero like Spider-Man is an acrobatic improviser in our world, so he relies very heavily on his acrobatic melee moves, and he only really has his web shooters and a couple gadgets, so we couldn't rely on the over-the-top weapons. And that's why we also had to start working on combat early on. And then last but not least, even without the story and gameplay, we can also work on render targets and experimenting with different art styles. For any story-driven game, you also have to think about the story. So after doing extensive research by watching Marvel movies, reading comic books, and playing video games, and I know this is not sounding like a real job at this point, but after extensive research, we decided that we wanted to make a game that played like a Marvel movie feels. And we also wanted to tell a human story, not just a superhero story. The best Spider-Man stories are the ones where Peter and Spider-Man's worlds collide. Now, we normally develop gameplay and the story together. So as the gameplay becomes more fun, we find ways to hook that gameplay back into the story. As the story becomes more fleshed out and interesting, we find ways to hook that story back into the gameplay. If they aren't intertwined, the entire experience can feel disjointed and non-interactive. And like I keep saying, the creation process is very organic and a little bit messy. So we always end up creating games that have more ideas than we can possibly use, and we spend most of the time editing it down, only to have it expand again. So I would say the creation process is a lot about expanding and contracting, expanding and contracting. And we only ever stop because we have deadlines. So going back to the question of how do we create games, I always got the impression that people were asking me this because they wanted the paint-by-numbers solution or the formula on how to create a game. But the truth of the matter is, game creation is an organic process. And that's part of the fun. And that's what it means to me to create. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacinda. Wow, your job sounds absolutely horrible. I don't know who would want to watch movies and read comic books and play video games, you know. Like, that's not a job I want that job so bad. So, next up is going to be Emily Greer. And Emily Greer is the founder and CEO of Double Loop Games, a new mobile game studio. She was also the co-founder and CEO of Congregate, which launched more than 50 mobile games, including hits such as Adventure Capitalist and Animation Throwdown. As a self-proclaimed data geek at heart, Emily is well known in the game industry for her presentations on the economics and psychology of free-to-play games. So let's give a big round of applause to Emily Greer.
Hi, thank you for that warm welcome. My job is not as cool as Jacinda's, and I am a business person, so I don't have any pretty art to show. But hopefully I can talk about something that is interesting to everybody, which is actually going to be about failure. So failure, I think, is inherently tied with creation. And the theme of create and the theme of this micro talk is something that's felt very apropos to me, because my year of 2019 has been very much about creation. Back in March, I made the difficult decision to leave Congregate, the company I'd co-founded and run for 13 years. And at the heart of the decision was that I missed making things. That's the weird catch-22 of founding a company. You start something, you create something, but if you're successful, your creation takes on a life and identity of its own. And your job as a leader is to edit and prune and prod, coach and encourage, and it's not really to make anymore. Those are all meaningful things to do. Things that, if done well, can have big impacts, but I still really missed creating. Creating things is fun. It's rewarding. It's also hard and frustrating and scary. All of those things are true, but if we're honest about it, the really fun part is the beginning, when you're coming up with the ideas, when you can see something new in your mind, and every part of it is beautiful and amazing, and it's kind of hazy around the edges, and kind of glows because you haven't figured things out yet. After you start things, things get difficult, that organic, messy process that Jacinda was talking about. Mistakes start to creep in, pieces don't complement each other. After all, compromises have to be made, sometimes because of time. And like the rest of life, everything gets messy. And many projects, particularly non-commercial ones where the stakes are lower, and I'm talking about like half my knitting projects, get abandoned. Sometimes this is because they're actively bad in a way that you can't fix. Again, I'm talking about knitting projects. But sometimes it's because the gap between what will be, what you can now see taking shape, and what you imagined is too big. And sometimes people stop at the idea and never get started, paralyzed by the potential failure and sort of strangle that beautiful idea in their mind rather than let it become something imperfect. To really create, you have to get past those feelings. You have to accept discomfort, likely failure, and guaranteed imperfection. The best way to do that is to push through it and to finish things even when you don't want to, and habituate yourself to those feelings. Make them part of the process. When I was 30, I took up figure skating as a hobby. I talk about figure skating a lot. I can't help it, sorry. And part of it is because early on my coach said something to me that has really stuck with me. If you're not falling, you're not trying. To figure out how to do a turn or a jump or a spin, you have to push your body a little bit past where it's comfortable being so you can figure out what it actually can do. A lot of times you also figure out what it can't do and you end up on your butt. I fall a lot more than other skaters, other adults who skate. I once went to the Dorothy Hamill Fantasy Figure Skating Camp. Yes, I'm that much of a geek. And there were 17 of us, and at the end of the week, I realized that I had fallen more than the other 16 skaters combined. That's a lot of falling. But I've also progressed a lot faster than other adults, and it's because of that willingness to fall and being okay with it. And it's really helped me frame falls and failure as part of the process of learning and creating. So now at 45, I'm starting my second company, and I'm enjoying all the high of the ideas of what the company can be, and what it could mean for the industry, and what games we can make, knowing that it's all going to get harder and more murky over the next few years. But creating a company to create games is actually a meta-creation. In the end, what I'm really creating is the environment for a team of people working together to make something great. And for everyone to do their best work, they each need to feel individually that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to speak their minds, okay to be themselves, and okay to fail. For teams, there's a phrase called psychological safety, and research has shown, I think particularly Google has put a lot of investment into it and come up into this kind of research, and it's shown that it's the single most important quality in successful teams. So how do you establish psychological safety? For me, I think it begins with leaders modeling it and team members modeling it. Talking about your mistakes, talking about the process, and framing failure as part of the process, part of progress. At Congregate, we used to do new hire orientations, and I would do a presentation about the history of Congregate. And I included a screenshot of a 2009 email that I sent in which I said no to Minecraft. Yep, I said no to Minecraft. And the reason I put that in that deck is that I wanted employees to see this is the biggest mistake I, the CEO, could possibly have made. But guess what? The company turned out pretty successful anyway. And you should never worry about making a mistake. You can't screw up worse than I did. And in general, yeah, and it still turned out okay. Don't be afraid to make them. Don't be afraid to call them out in others. And don't be afraid to admit them when you make them yourselves. As a leader, it's also really important to make sure that you listen to criticism. If you're defensive or ignore it, people will stop saying what they're seeing, and you'll learn less, you'll progress less, you won't get anywhere. You have to encourage criticism, and then when you encourage it and you hear it, you have to answer it and act on it whenever it's reasonable. Be transparent about why things are happening and give the team full context on decisions so they can trust and understand why you're making certain decisions and why you're approaching things in certain ways. Finally, and most importantly, treat everyone with respect and expect the same from everyone. If you diminish anyone, you diminish your whole team. How can anyone feel safe if they see people being torn down? So that's what I'm thinking. What I'm thinking about as we start Double Loop Games. Like most people here, I want to make great games, and I want to make great games with a happy team. I may fail, and I'm definitely going to screw it up along the way, but I know that's part of the process, and creating is the reward.
These talks are already going way too fast. I want to hear so much more of your story. But thank you so much, Emily, for sharing that, because it's important, especially when we look at people so accomplished, to know that they're human too. So the next person that we have coming up is Kiki Wolfkill. And how cool of a name is Kiki Wolfkill? Kiki is currently head of Halo Transmedia and Entertainment at 343 Industries. And before joining 343 Industries, Kiki was the director of art at Microsoft Studios. Her past game credits include the Project Gotham Racing and Forza Motorsport franchises, as well as video game series such as Fable, Crackdown, Gears of War, and Mass Effect. That's my game right there. All right, sir. Too happy, too happy. When she joined 343 Industries in 2009 as executive producer, Kiki was responsible for building the internal Halo 4 production team. And she also served as executive producer on the digital series Halo, The Fall of Reach, and Halo Nightfall. Today, Kiki is working on the upcoming Halo television series. Please welcome Kiki to the stage.
Thank you. Oops, man down, woman down. Oh, I've reached a milestone. I have to put glasses on. First I'm going to say, I'm not going to be talking about Halo specifically today. I apologize in advance. I'm taking this talk a little selfishly, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey, but I wanted to start by thanking The Strong for inviting me here, for letting me sit and be amongst these amazing women and creators, and for the theme tonight of Create. When I first saw it, I sort of had a slight panic because it's such a big theme and topic. And then this sort of calm settled in because I was like, you know what, this has been my most singular passion for as long as I can remember. And it let me sort of reflect on my creative journey, which I'm really thankful for. So now I'm going to inflict it upon you, but thank you to the Strong. So who I am as a creative and the how and what of what I do has evolved so much. At the same time, I also feel like I haven't changed at all since I was a child and imagined stories in my head. I see myself as a storyteller. It's what I love to do, and I feel like that was something that was in me from as long as I honestly can remember. I was a voracious reader. I was drawing all the time. In second grade, I won my school's Young Authors Contest for my book about a rabbit named Lindsay, who, by the way, was named after Lindsay Wagner, the $6 Million woman. But it was a story that I wrote and I illustrated, and it wasn't very good, but I got to draw bunnies. And I continued to paint and draw through college, but it was definitely art as an individual pursuit. And so after college, my first job in gaming was as a video editor and game artist. I still got to tell stories, but I also composited little golf players. I worked on flight sim, I made loading screens, I designed UI buttons. I was a game artist. Sometimes I thought of myself as an artiste, but it was still really sort of an isolated act. And even though it plugged into something bigger, it plugged into a bigger project, it still felt like a solo creation. That said, I could see what I created, and I felt ownership over it, and it felt really good, and it felt really validating to see this thing that I had made. As I progressed in my career, and I went from artist to manager to then lead, I went through sort of various stages of mourning for my artiste self. I began to question my value as a creative. If I wasn't hands-on creating the thing, like what was I doing? Like what was my value and where was my validation? And what I realized is that I got to create differently. You know, as art director, it was about providing direction and bringing focus to other artists. But I also got to shift to creating not just things, but also ideas. But then I also thought value came from having the best idea, and that somehow like the best idea was at the expense of there being other ideas. Like there was some scarcity in the economy for ideas, and that one had to win out over others. And I soon understood that wasn't true, and that the best idea often comes from the act of exploring the ideas of many, or that maybe the best idea could come from somewhere or someone unexpected. Then when I moved into an EP position, I learned to lead with vision, and that was using really a different creative muscle again. And it was really about creating a framework for other, frankly, better creatives to do their best work, but to make sure that there was a North Star that they knew that they could always be pointed towards. Creating worlds and experiences has to be born of collaboration and an abundance mindset that says there is room for all of the ideas. My validation came from the collective success of others. It came from the collective success of the team, which leads me to today. So this is where you say, gosh, she's a really slow learner. I still get to tell stories, and I still get to build experiences, and for that I'm so grateful. I will never stop doing that. But beyond storytelling, I also focus my creative energy in some new places, at least for me. And that first place is on creating intention. The intention to show up more authentically as myself, to not care about validation, and to trust my instincts thoroughly, but also be okay when I'm wrong, which gets to what Emily was saying about failure. And it's allowed me to create so much more freely and without constraint. And then secondly, and more importantly, for my projects and my teams, I focus my energy on creating space for other voices to be heard, and space for differing opinions, creating space for risks to be taken, and space for others to rise, because that's really what we need to be making better games and to be creating more inclusive experiences and telling more inclusive stories. And frankly, it's what we need to be better humans. Creating space for others is a gift, and it's something that we can all do today. My creativity and how I choose to spend my creative energy has evolved in ways I wish I had had the foresight to have been able to accelerate for myself. Art can be both selfish and it can be generous, but you can choose what you create and the impact it has on others. You can choose for the creative process to be a warm and welcoming place for ideas to thrive and where you can be your authentic self. You can choose to create with generosity, which is how I choose today to move forward with my creative. I'll leave you with this quote from Madeleine L'Engle, which I love. An artist is a nourisher and creator who knows that during the act of creation is collaboration. We do not create alone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kiki, the woman who is human, and her name is as cool as she is. And even though you didn't have foresight, you shared your experiences with us, so now we can sort of use it for ourselves. So thank you for that. So let's continue. And the next person that we're going to bring to the stage is Elizabeth LaPensée. And Elizabeth is, man, I can't wait to hear her talk. Elizabeth is an award-winning designer, writer, artist, and researcher who creates and studies indigenous-led media, games, and comics. As a Anishinaabe, I might have pronounced that wrong, so if I did, my apologies, a group of culturally related indigenous peoples in what is now Canada in the United States, Elizabeth collaborates closely with indigenous communities to pass on teachings which honor the past, reflect the present, and resonate with the future. In 2017, Elizabeth designed and created art for the Thunderberg Strike, which won Best Digital Media at the Imaginative Film and Media Arts Festival. Most recently, she was named 2017's Human of the Year by Motherboard for her work building a better future through science and technology, and was a 2018 Guggenheim Fellow. Today, Elizabeth is a professor of media and information and writing, rhetoric, and American cultures at Michigan State University. She does a lot. Please welcome Elizabeth LaPensée.
Ani, I'm going to introduce myself in my language. Wabon anong indigenous cause, minawa kakakandorum, minawa bawating and dojba. My name is Beth LaPensée. I am both Anishinaabe and Métis, and I am a designer, artist, writer, I don't know, spazbot, I think is basically what I am. And for me, to create is to breathe. It's something that's very vital to my well-being. If I don't create, I can't human. Like I get to the point where like I'm going for a walk somewhere and there might be some human beings out there and they might be like nice human beings. It's not just because I'm taking a walk in the woods that I'm concerned about there being a human being, but just the fact that they are human. I'm like, oh, I can't handle it. Can't make eye contact. I can't talk to these people right now. And I'll like divert and go through the bush just because I have not created a piece of art in the recent span of time relative to that walk. So for me, it is something that is compulsory, but it is also related to the immensity of healing and connecting with land and acting in relation with my community. And so a lot of the work that I do connects with elders, storytellers, youth, stories that I grew up with. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the creative process behind Thunderbird Strike, of which there's just one screenshot here. Because I don't get to talk about that. All I ever get to talk about is the fact that the government accused me of training eco-terrorists. Hey, okay. All right, that's kind of a big deal. And audited me, and then like created a couple bills against me, one of them that didn't go through because, you know, against the act of creative expression. The second of which is going through because in the state of Minnesota, based on this game, they actually like name me in the game. It's fun times. Politicians decided that any arts funding which is used to portray which they, as the Senate, get to determine as portraying civil disobedience, or what they reframed as domestic terrorism, because apparently their media platform of accusing me of eco-terrorism resulted in a bunch of Native people picking up a phone, calling the senator and saying, "We're not the eco-terrorists, you're the eco-terrorists." So they edited it to domestic terrorism. Can be fined up to 10 times the amount that they were given on taxpayer funds. That bill's actually going through right now. Naturally, it sounds like a great bill you might want to have. Yeah, it'd be great. We shouldn't, represent those things on taxpayer funds, because of this Elizabeth LaPensée person. So that's moving through. That's a great, amazing story behind that game. Death threats. Yay! Had to change my phone number. Yay! Totally did not contribute to my anxiety, which means I can't make eye contact with human beings, and I have to go hide away and draw now. Not related at all. So instead, I would like to actually get a chance to talk about the creative process behind it. Thunderbird Strike started in a peculiar kind of way. I had lost everything in a wildfire that then quickly turned into a house fire out in the bush. Yay! And I made out with my laptop because that is important. When there's a fire, the first thing you go for is your laptop. And then also my children. who are here with me today. They are alive. They're here with me. They're very well. They're also here. And that was it. I had one Micron pen with enough ink to draw on one of those little pieces of paper you find in a motel, on a little desk there. One Thunderbird. And then the pen ran out of ink. And I was like, all right, cool. I guess that's it for me. I can't justify buying art supplies during that time. So I went on to make a different game. I asked Stephen Paul Judd, who's a very well-known Native artist, for his piece called Invaders, which was a spin on Space Invaders, which we can't actually display anymore because Space Invaders was bought, and now anyone who uses the actual Space Invaders imagery, their work will be taken down. because it wasn't perceived as a form of art, right, any longer. So I did turn his art piece into a game called Invaders, and that went on to be a commentary on who are the invaders in Space Invaders, and what do we mean when we're talking about invasion. And after that game wrapped up, I was able to go back to this Thunderbird. And I was like, well, what is this? What is this Thunderbird? What is this piece doing? And I recalled all the stories that I grew up with, and it turned into me doing the kind of work that I do, which is that I hand draw everything. This work is 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of hand drawing. Some of them are 6, some of them are 7. It's all hand-drawn ink work, all scanned on pieces of paper, sometimes by hand, because that's a lot of fun if I don't have a machine to feed it through, and then I digitize it. I work with materials that are very relatable to Anishinaabe teachings, like copper, beads, different kind of work like that, and it's all infused. In the case of Thunderbird Strike, all the waters that you see actually come from waters which oil is impacting right now. All of the animations are done through stop motion animation, where I like to move things pixel by pixel, because that's exactly what you should be doing with your life. And so every 1 minute of animation is 1 month of work. Yay! Laid out at 6 frames per second, where everything is turned into screenshots and then put into a program like Final Cut and then run at 6 frames per second. And there's this sort of like immense care that happens with work like that, where you get this real micro vision. And so when I'm working on the kind of games that I make that are mine, I also could do consulting for other people, or do writing, or I do a little bit of design work here and there. But with my own work, it really comes down to like looking at every pixel and seeing everything. And so I do things that are not typical of games, not typical, and nor would I recommend them. Creatively, say, no, the last thing you should do is follow my process. It's terrible. It's really grueling. You stay up at night. Don't follow my process. Having said that, one thing that is very interesting to me about Thunderbird Strike, aside from the controversy, is that when you are playing this game, which is a side-scroller, typically backgrounds in games will be on loops, because that makes sense. They should be. It reduces the amount of, storage and everything. It's really good to do that. Reduces work for the artist. For every level in the game, there are between 38 to 40 unique background images. And the reason for that is that some of the textures actually come from the giant trucks that are the ones responsible for tearing up land and hauling out bitumen and other resources, oil resources. They're a part of the extraction process. Because I'd actually gone up there and I'd seen it. And when I went there, this was prior to the drawing of the Thunderbird, this was prior to the fire, prior to all of this, there was something that was embedded in me, because I actually went to Fort McMurray, one of the hearts of oil industry. And it was like Mordor, but like for real. I was like, oh, this is not a film. This is like real. And there was like this yellow eye of cloud over this building and this permanent movement of lightning striking down and this sickness in the air that you can smell. And I was sick for 2 months after. And my child, Malcolm, who was there with me as a baby, was also sick for 2 whole months after. And I had only been there for 2 days. And I'm not the only one who's had this experience where the number of days you're there equals the number of months that you're sick afterwards. And so that really stayed with me. And so the game for me, the process was about portraying our traditional stories. I didn't set out to be perceived a particular way, but I was called an activist because of this. When the reality, in fact, is that I am a mother who wants to see a better future for the next generations, but I'm also at the very heart of it, an artist who has to create compulsively. And it was a game that I could not make. It had to happen. It was a weekend warrior project that took way too long to make, through weekends while hustling and working a lot of other contracts in order to get that work done, staying up late after putting my children to bed, whatever I needed to do to get this game made and get this game out there, because I was answering to my elders, to my community members, to storytellers about what we say about Thunderbirds. So, in the game, it's a side-scroller where you play as a Thunderbird striking lightning down at mining company buildings in the big giant mining trucks, which apparently got a little bit of attention. But an aspect of that game that is so meaningful to me is that you can actually also strike lightning down at the animals who are dead and have been turned into bones, buffalo, wolves, and caribou, and you can bring them back to life. And they're one of the few forms of actual genuine animation within the game play itself. And so all of the other figures are static, but the animals are very much so alive, along with you as a Thunderbird. And so for anyone out there who is working on games and looking into what happens through their own creative process, there is this work that happens in and of itself. And it's okay if it takes years to happen. And it's okay if it's a struggle. Because the very fact of it is that Thunderbird Strike hit in a way that I could not have planned. It was intended to happen the way it happened beyond me. I was hit by oil lobbyists the same moment I was hit by getting an award at Imaginative Film and Media Arts Festival that year for Best Digital Media. The two communities did not know about one another. It transcended any kind of distribution I would have sought for it. In fact, I had it as a link to download on Dropbox. Because I only planned for some friends and family members to play this, and yeah, I'll submit it to the Native Film Festival and Media Arts Festival that means the most to me of any venue. But what I did not realize was that I would crash the link by so many attempts to download it because I was so poor at that time I didn't even pay for a Dropbox account. I was like, oh, I guess I should pay for a Dropbox account if it's going to have this many downloads. And then it went to distribution platforms like Google Play and the Apple App Store. Only, in a sense, in spite of the government attack, which was seeking to close down on the game at that moment. And they wanted all copies deleted. They wanted the game completely eradicated. That's what the platform was of the senator who then eventually backed the oil lobbyists. When in fact what then happened is it generated a lot of attention around the game. And there was this motion and movement around it that was really quite beyond me. And so I really want there to be this acknowledgement that this too can happen within games as a space, that games can be art in this sense of the voices that come through us, through our creativity, are in these moments, not ours. They belong to those who came before us and those who are around us in this moment, and they are intended for those who will come after us. So thank you, miigwech.
Wow. I mean, that just goes to show you that there are many ways games are inspired, games are created, and thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing your story. All right, so let's get to our next talk. So the next woman that we're bringing to the stage is Jennifer, actually, my apologies, is Anne McCormick. My apologies. So Anne was the founder of The Learning Company, a children's educational software firm where she served as chairman of the board and lead designer, shaping the company's first 16 products, including Reader Rabbit and Rocky's Boots. And has also served as an advisor to education and technology leaders in 15 countries. She has consulted with Apple Computer, IBM, Northern Telecom, and many other technology, publishing, research, and telecommunications companies, and earned her doctorate in education at the University of California at Berkeley, where she was invited to deliver the 100th anniversary commencement address. A true innovator, a trailblazer, please welcome Anne McCormick.
I guess I have to forward it 1 second. I am in awe of this place, these people, especially these women who are speaking. It's just hard to take the next step. One moment. Create. The roots of why we do it and how it unfolds. I want to juxtapose creating with the power of limits, because I would think that creating was wildly free and divergent. I'm a very divergent thinker. I can hardly keep an analytic course of thought without huge effort. And in reality, creation has limits, shown in basic forms that turn up over and over in nature. These are made by physics. Branching is one of those 6 basic shapes. A tree, a spider web, a computer code. Another is the meander of a river, a wall, or a snake. And it's just like a river builds up silt and then it turns back, and it's just how things are. I'll apply this to games in a minute. Part of it is I'm setting up as beauty and awe are common emotions, just as horror and fear, and I'm bringing us to mind of beauty. The spiral, there are spirals going 2 ways inside a sunflower. And the same spiral is in galaxies, in a ram's horn, in the top of a redwood tree. The helix has this double helix of DNA, a roller coaster, a galaxy. The sphere, yeah, I'm in the right place, that's good. There's a moon of Saturn in the big picture, a water drop. Once I was working with Bill Atkinson, who is the designer of the Macintosh computer at Apple, the very first little one like that one over there. And he was bringing circles for children to work with in kindergarten. And one of the children said, "Bill, why is the world a sphere?" And he said, "I'll answer you tomorrow." And instead of words, he came back with a video of an astronaut pouring water in space where there was a vacuum, and it formed a perfect circle. I thought, what an elegant way to answer a child's question. So this is one of the limits of the physics of space and water. A hexagon, water has 2 oxygens, so it spreads out in 2s, and somehow they connect to make 6-sided snowflakes, every single snowflake on Earth. Isn't that interesting? And bees make honeycombs with the wax around their bodies, and when they smoosh together, the natural form is a hexagon from the soft wax. Chicken wire, it's that way in pattern blocks and so many other things. And I find it just fascinating to find these things wherever you look. So I teach children about them a lot. To create video games for children's learning, which is what I do, we have to understand the limits of 3 things. One is the device. I learned early on, like, how do I create a video game? And I'd been a school teacher, a researcher, and I was wisely advised you have to define every input and every output. I'd never had to do such an exacting thing as a teacher or a researcher. Secondly, you have to know about the child, what's fun, how learning works, like how children think, feel, and act. I want to stop and just say this little child is playing with Osmo, and their website is playosmo.com. I hope to work with them sometime. I'm not involved, and I didn't do this work. But what I love about it is they put that little red object over the video player on the iPad, and they put it in a base that's got a certain angle. And the character on the screen very nicely says, "You want to have a magic show?" And there's some other things the kids say, "No, I want to do something else." That's fine. But if they want to make a magic show, he said, "Let's make a magic wand." And he draws one, and he says, "Can you draw it?" And the child draws their own magic wand, and whatever it looks like, Mo, the character on the screen, reaches down off the edge of the computer screen and goes and pulls the child's wand up onto the screen, and he goes, and then he does magic with it. And then he asks the children to make a stuffed animal, and he pulls it in, and he's, "Oh, I love this animal." And it's the very drawing the child made. Similarly, there's little pieces for learning coding, and they learn loops. They learn all kinds of things starting when my grandson does it when he's 6. Tangrams, numbers, letters. And I love the juxtaposition of on-screen and off-screen, physical reality being pulled into the computer and played with. Third, you need to know the limits of the topic. How to reveal the essence of something. Not just tell it, but how do you get at what's wonderful about it? What's just like arresting and magical and fun and playful and fabulous about it? And that's not always what happens in school. So I want to share with you a progression from my own life. When I began wanting to create games, I was in my 30s. I'd never touched a computer with my own hands. I'd never had a course. And I say that because I want to encourage people to not think they have to go study it. I wrote a proposal to Apple. It was 9 pages long, and I won an Apple II. And it's like, I had a little child, and I was so thrilled. So I found out, what can you play on it? And one thing was Colossal Cave Adventure. Who's played with that before? Yeah, isn't it great? It's a text adventure, notice all uppercase. You are inside a building, a well house for a large spring. There are some keys on the ground here. You have to then type in what you're going to do. You say, pick up key, and then it knows it's tracking what you're saying, but it's all text interaction. Kids were over at my house, 5 deep, playing that game for months. And it was great for me because I was making dinner, and they'd call me in when they figured out how to get through the maze of twisty little passages. That was 1976. It was a DEC PDP-10. That was a mainframe that was the core of the ARPANET, which became the internet. Very significant work. Will Carruthers, who made it, I had nothing to do with making it. I just admired it because I had kids playing it. He was at Bolt Baranecka Newman, and he was a caver. And he did this for his own daughter, to be closer to her. I just read that. Then I met a young guy. One day I went to Personal Software, where they made VisiCalc, the first spreadsheet. And there were 100,000 Apple IIs anywhere on Earth that had sold, and 100,000 copies of what became VisiCalc had sold. And so there had to be some, like people who bought it before they bought the computer, because some were in stores. Anyway, Mitch Kapoor flew overnight. He was a kid. He started Lotus. And he had breakfast with me because the guy at Personal Software wanted to acquire my company. Well, I had a business card that said I was the president, but I was the president of nobody. because I just had an idea, and I had a card printed because I thought that looked good. Anyway, this has a happy ending, don't worry. He told me about a program. He said, I would feel a lot better if you had written one line of code. So he said, what you need is someone that can program. And there's a guy named Warren Robinette, and he made Atari Adventure. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm the wrong page. I'm so sorry. There we go. Very sorry. This is Adventure with its uppercase text, the Cave Adventure. 3 years later, Warren Robinette came out with Atari Adventure, and he's famous for hiding an Easter egg in it with his identity because Atari would not let him put his name on it. Well, notice it has a key, and you need the key to open the castle door, and there's a goal, which is to find the magic Holy Grail and bring it to the castle. He told me about this, and if you're in the yellow room and you go off the edge of the screen, you end up in the green room, and it's all you see. So I played that with children, and they were pointing over in the closet about where something was. To them, that whole space existed. And Warren had to do this in 128 bits of RAM. That's a tiny part of 1 byte, not a gigabyte, 1 byte. And that was the whole memory of the computer on the VCS machine that Atari had, those game machines. And you could play it with a joystick, which was pretty cool. But see the breakthrough between the text and the graphics, and they each had trade-offs that were better. The Colossal Cave was way more complicated and interesting in a way, but people liked to zoom around in that game. Now, Warren drew, I sat on the floor with him in an empty office where there was no furniture, and we were talking about becoming partners, and he told me about Rocky's Boots. We later named it that, because he liked Rocky Raccoon. And we didn't admit that, we just named it that. And he drew an AND gate, an OR gate, and a NOT gate. And the AND gate is the one connected to the blue boot. The OR gate is just above the raccoon. And the NOT gate is the triangular one with a circle. And he said these three things, with these three concepts, you can make every piece of hardware and software in the entire world. And I went, kids should know about that. So he made an alligator that would chase and eat the cursor, and my little daughter just crawled under the table. She was so scared of that alligator. She was about 3. And he made a kicking boot that would kick targets, but you make a combination of ands, ors, and nots to kick something that's green and purple, but not a plus. That's an example of a game. And on the photograph, that's me in my 30s when Warren finished Rocky's Boots. And Scott Mace is in the middle. He was a wonderful writer for InfoWorld magazine, and we got on the cover of InfoWorld. IBM gave us $300,000 to get that game, which was a fortune in that time. And we got very well known because of Warren's work. But you see how it built on adventure? It had the same idea of rooms, and but he had 64 rooms, and he had some real purpose more than just finding a key and opening a castle. Then a kid from Stanford, I'm showing you a progression of how a creative idea can build. I have to move it myself. A kid from Stanford who was a freshman came to my office, and I remember him leaning on my doorway. I was chairman of the board and president, and he said, I want to make something like Rocky's Boots, but your nephew, my nephew worked there, and he said, it's such a pain to go 3 rooms over and get a wire and bring it back, and 3 rooms up and get an AND gate and bring it back. There should be a bag of holding, like in Dungeons and Dragons, so you can put the things in the bag and bring them with you. So they let him, we could just draw these rooms by driving around. There was a graphics utility we called the utility, because it was so important to us, that made the rooms and the objects. And he said, I'd like to make a chip, and you can burn the chip into ROM, and you can put chips inside of chips 16 deep, and then run robots with it. So the middle picture is a robot. Do you see how that's a variation of the room? But then that blue robot's running around in the room, and the chips are inside the robot running the robot. And this was in 1988. Mike Wallace thought of it. He was the kid who was like 18 or 19. We bought him a helmet for his precious head because he drove a motorcycle without a helmet. And he did it in 64K of RAM on an Apple II. And I was invited to give a talk at Xerox PARC, a very prestigious place. And I said, no, Mike's going to give the talk. And when he showed it, the people in the audience were looking for a cord to a secret mainframe. They said, we didn't think a microcomputer could do that. But it's because Warren was used to shoehorning assembler code into just such a tiny space that they could do these astonishing things in tiny memory. 128 bits, that's what Warren had, so 64 K of bytes was a lot. But they just used every section of it. And I don't think I said this yet. Warren thought of the code spatially. He'd just put this routine out over here and that routine over there. And then it'd take him 8 hours to set it up to make one line of new code. So we let him work at home where nobody called him ever. He worked in a pool house. And then he'd connect those things, but he made the rooms to go with where his code was stored. Isn't that interesting? It's just a creative process I find astonishing. And what I'm pleased about myself is that I let him do it. That's what I get credit for. I paid for it. I got a grant that I wrote. I had done a dissertation on Black dialect and reading in first grade, and I thought, okay, I wrote an NSF proposal. This is the most important thing I'm going to tell you if you're young and still writing proposals. I said, you got to get past people forgetting your proposal, because a whole bunch of proposals are going to be good and very few are going to be funded. So put something outrageous that they go, what? So I said in my proposal that I was going to make video games for 2nd and 3rd grade gifted Black dialect speaking children to learn geometry and logic. Every reviewer would say, I don't like that part about Black dialect. Well, I knew a lot about it because I'd exhaustively studied it for my doctoral work, and because I taught all Black kids and I needed to understand what was going on. Anyway, that helps you be remembered even if it's outrageous. That is a very key thing. I had my nephew I helped him get a job with Jim Henson, and Jim had him pull the Kermit the Frog balloon in the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade, and he put that right in his resume, and nobody forgot it. I had another nephew. Everybody sent me nephews. People started applying to be my nephew. I collect nephews, actually. They're wonderful. I had my other nephew write that he had such a boring, thoroughly competent resume, and I said, okay, you're applying to Google. Put your name, Eric C. AAAASE, in the Google font and logo. And he immediately got a job because it got passed around. Isn't that silly? And so do something that's outrageous and memorable. That's my gift. Anyway, the same year that, like a couple of years after, we put out 6 products. We got that NSF grant. We did Rocky's Boots for 2nd and 3rd grade gifted children. And I found out 6 seconds of speech would use up the entire memory of the computer, so I had to wait on the Black dialect part. But it was suitable for children that were so bright but didn't have a chance to show what they knew. Now, another progression, one progression was Adventure to Robot Odyssey. Another progression was Reader Rabbit, which we did in 1984. It was Leslie Graham came in with it, and I said, oh gosh, stuff is all over. Your eyes are up here and over here. Another key thing is you've got to have your eyes track where you want their attention. You just can't put things all over. So I made it so that you're just matching the first sound or letter of tab with a G, and you could change that to the initial middle position and look for the A. It had every word in the Standard English Dictionary except what people objected to, like gun. We had to leave that out. And that game sold 14 million copies, the series of Reader Rabbit, which was really something in that time frame. It wasn't just in 1 year that it sold that many copies, but it was amazing. And I didn't invent it, but I helped shape it. And I loved other talks because everything is so true in my experience. It takes a team. And what I've done is notice that other people had way better ideas than I ever thought of. I'm glad I'm on the right page. Next, let's see. My latest game is Reader B, and I purposely made it a play on Reader Rabbit. And instead of 64K of bytes, there's 128 gigabytes of RAM. Millions of colors. The other one had 6 colors. High-speed internet to deliver it instead of no hard drive. There's a touch screen and a tiny machine instead of a PDP, a room-size computer or Apple II that takes up a whole desk, and that we didn't have a mouse or a joystick the first few years, so for Reader Rabbit, we just used the keyboard as the interface because a little child could find the keyboard. On this, you can touch it, and let me see how. Oh, I've got to do this to make it play. Is the sound up? You can't hear him. He just squeals with delight. And one of the things that I did was say, we're only going to work with 7 letters at a time. Because I have a PowerPoint for Apple that I showed in kindergarten. You've got 26 letters, uppercase, lowercase, 100 sight words, and there's all these other things you're supposed to learn in kindergarten. And it's ridiculous. So this little child, we only have lowercase, we only have that's one shape, and we only have 1 sound for each. They can learn more later, but C is for cat, not for scent. And then with that array of letters, you can make many little words like cat, hat, sat, mat, tan, can, man, act, ant, and so forth. And they can type it when they're this little. And in 10 minutes, they can go from tracing the letter to typing the word and typing any words that they want. Once this little can't type them readily themselves, I help them, but when they're 5, they really can. And then they get the idea of the alphabetic principle, which a lot of kids are taught all this stuff before they know what's really going on, that letters make words and words make stories. So we made a really stupid story about a man who sat on a mat and along came a cat and he wanted a hat, and on the hat was an ant, and the ant wanted a hat too. It was a little something funny, and the ant, the hat had a little wheel on it, and it would make the ant fly. Anyway, in my 70s, I made 9 games that are Reader B games, and they won 15 national awards. They're now about 3 years old. This is in the App Store. A good way to find it is readerb.com. And Apple saw it and said, Apple would like your keyboard because, let me see, the next thing I did, see how that little A with the letters around it, that's going to have an E and I. There's going to be a fed red hen. All the vowels are going to have letters around them. Patent pending. I just signed the papers. And that's the kids making their words, like mat, cat, sat. And there's the story, what can we do with this mat? So that's Reader B, and then there are sequels. It builds up like 10 words for each initial sound, and then uppercase letters, and there's more. But we've done a fingernail of what we could do. I do have the whole keyboard. Let's see. There it is, where it's all put together. In 1985, a neighbor showed me work of Edward Montgomery, and it was something like this black and white one, that had, Edward Montgomery, a professor in Texas, had studied the English language and found sets of 3 letters that come together in English. And THE is 12% of all English. Well, why not put those things together? Well, in those days, it was hard to do swiped keyboards and hard to have a peripheral device, so it just didn't make it commercially. But I thought, that could help kids learn to read. And then I went on to make the little daisies with the A, E, I, O, and U, which I think was very creative of me. I love it. It got taken away from me by an investor. But it exists, and it's available on every iPad. The iPhone is too small for it, but across the middle is wither. Do you see wither down there? And it's got with, it, he, her, there, here, it. And then there's is, it, in, to, of. All those little words, which educators sometimes call dolch words, are one stroke. And so in Montgomery's studies, people could type 250 words a minute. And now you can use this keyboard with Safari and Mail and everything. So that's my most recent creative contribution. There's all the numbers and everything. Has everything from a standard Apple keyboard. So what inspires me to create? Little kids. Don't you all agree? These little ones are my grandson and his cousin, who was born the same hour in the Ukraine and then came to live near my grandson. He says, I love my Stevie. And I'm aware that 1 child in 3 in the United States will never learn to read at the 6th grade level. This has gone on for years, and it should stop. So I say, let's solve that problem. We can create a video game solution with all your skill. Thank you. I can hardly walk, so I'll be slow. Thanks. Yeah, my legs, I got scared.
Oh, no. We got you.
When I get the wood, I'll be fine.
Anne McCormick is so humble and so modest, but she is an extraordinary example of the impact educators and teachers can have on our children. She was gaming and creating games over 40 years ago, and that is incredibly impressive. And if you need some more nephews, I will gladly be one of your nephews. So we're going to go through this rather quickly, but I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker, which is Jennifer O'Neill. And Jennifer, she serves as a studio head for Vicarious Visions, a video game developer in Albany, New York. And over the last 15 years, Jennifer has also held a variety of roles in and at Activision and Vicarious Visions, including publishing producer on the Tony Hawk franchise, executive producer on Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, and multiple titles within the Guitar Hero and Skylander franchises. So please welcome Jennifer O'Neill to the stage.
All right, so I got asked to talk about creativity, and my background is production. My creative medium is a spreadsheet. So this is like, I'm suffering from massive imposter syndrome being amongst these like amazing creative luminaries here. So when I get nervous, I'm just gonna say, go Tigers, right? That's like a thing here, right? All right, so when I was a little girl, I believed that this was a gamer, this child, this boy. Do you know who this is, by the way? It's Jack Black, yes. And he was very excited to play Pitfall. I mean, very excited. So I thought this was a gamer. Or this guy, you know, 80s bow tie wearing nerd. That was, you know, your typical gamer. But, you know, times have changed. And, you know, the reality is, there are gamers like this woman who is the first female Overwatch competitor. She's a pro. And gamers are these women too. These are the women of Vicarious Visions, and I'm very, very proud of this group. She's also this girl. That's my daughter, my heart. So cute in her little leotard playing my game, Crash Bandicoot. So when we think about creating games, we have to think about our audience, all of them. And we can't tell the same stories that we've been telling for 20 years. We have to think about our audience and give them the experiences that they want to have the story, tell them the stories that they want to hear. So a few years ago, we got this incredible opportunity to recreate the beloved Crash Bandicoot trilogy. And when it was first announced that we were going to be working on this, it was announced on the Sony stage at E3. There was a lot of excitement. Immediately, we started getting fan mail, people talking about how important this franchise was to them and how much it meant to their memories. And don't screw it up, basically. So we had to recreate this game with the utmost respect. And we couldn't forget our new audience either, though, because Crash was, one of the best platformers that ever was. It's super punishing, but it's also incredibly rewarding. And we want everyone to participate in that, not just the people who played it 20 years ago, but that little girl that you just saw. So when it came time to create the opening cutscene, I think this is a video, yeah, there we go. When it came time to create the opening cutscene, we realized that we had a big challenge on our hands. To stay rigorously faithful to the original game meant that we had to keep this lifeless, helpless damsel in distress. And, it seems like that should be an easy decision. Hey, you're supposed to recreate this piece the way it was. But we had to think about that new audience. And so the VV team was brave. They made a creative choice that still captured the essence of the cutscene, but portrayed Tana, who is Crash's girlfriend, as honestly as she should be today, as a powerful woman who would actually fight back in this kind of situation, who would have some level of agency in this situation. Now, we got a few negative comments, but we also got a lot of praise, and the game was overwhelmingly successful. So people were glad that Tana did her yoga boot camp and whatnot. So, and again, in the end, we got new fans, including that little girl in the leotard. We worked on a game called Destiny 2. Thank you. And when it came time for us to build our story for our Warmind expansion pack, the writers at both Bungie and VV worked together to tell a beautiful story. The writers were an extremely diverse group of men and women, both queer and straight, of all kinds of races, and they wanted to tell a new story where other members of the audience could see themselves reflected. Anna Bray was our main heroine. Like other Guardians, she was strong, mysterious, nearly immortal, and charged with defending humanity from the darkness. But unlike other Guardians, Anna had a deep curiosity about her purpose, believing that there was more to her Guardian's purpose than life doing patrols. She believed there was a better way for Guardians and humans to move forward together, which put her in conflict with the status quo. And that belief and conviction for a better future sprang for her very human love for her partner, Cameron. Cameron put her own life at risk for Anna, an immortal, realizing how precious life is and what real courage looks like. You only get so many opportunities in life, if at all, to share your creations on a broad scale like we do. And not everyone is going to like what you do. The creative process requires courage. And as long as you remember that we as creators are reflections of our audience, our truth is theirs too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer O'Neill. Some of these games that she just mentioned are near and dear to my heart, and she's reminding me of my purpose to play video games. So let us introduce our next awesome woman, Kelly Santiago. And she is the former president and co-founder of That Game Company, one of the most prominent brands in independent game development, whose PlayStation 3 game, Journey, oh my God, I love that game, was named GDC Game of the Year. Today, Kelly is head of developer relations at Niantic, and she is also co-founder and partner of Indie Fund. Passionate about innovation in games, entrepreneurship, games as art, and better methods for video game development, Santiago has been recognized as one of the 10 most influential women in games in the past decade, and we get to hear her speak right now. So please put your hands together for Kelly Santiago.
Okay, thank you. What's that? Thanks, Chad. Okay, do I just do this to go my slide? Okay, cool. So yes, create. There seems to be somewhat of a common theme here that I'm gonna focus on, which is that creating is super hard. All of the women honored here today are creators. Creators of companies, of games, of characters, of communities. Each of them have learned and honed various skills in order to create those things. And those skills are important to note for those of you interested in also becoming creators in video games. But learning those skills isn't actually the really hard part, I think. The hard part is that creating requires each of us to be vulnerable. Because ultimately, there comes a point in any creative process where it's up to you to decide on what the right thing to do is and the right path to take. And it makes you vulnerable, as it will be your ideas left open on table for all to see. So I'd like to ask the other women here today if you could raise your hand if you've ever felt nervous about showing your work to someone else for fear of what they might think. See? All right, now, if you've ever had a number of people give you their opinions, but the one you're stuck thinking about at 2 a.m. is the one person who gave you negative feedback, could you raise your hand? Yeah, this happened to me literally last week. I was up in the middle of the night, and then I'm like, why? Why that one person? So you see, one of our greatest ironies as human beings is that we all hope and aspire to create in some way, and it might even be our entire purpose for kind of being the way we are as humans. But we all know how terrifying it can be, and yet we just love to criticize anyone who's sticking their neck out. So I thought it might be fun to further illustrate this point in sharing some choice opinions in relationship to some of our honorees here today. All right, Jacinda Chew, studio art director for Insomniac Games, of course developer of the recent Spider-Man game, which is super awesome. Here's what one person thought that they could really offer you as constructive feedback. Boring, slow, one of the worst Spider games I've played. I'm a Spider-Man game hater now. All of them. Just ruined the whole genre. Robin Hunicke, industry luminary, founder of Phenomena, creator of the game Luna. All right, so here's a person who thought they brought a dynamic perspective to the table of your work. Can't say I can recommend it unless you don't have much else to do or spend your cash on. So good. Oh, Megan Scavo. I don't think there are any surprises for you in this one. Former head of Game Developers Conference, now president of the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences. Here's what someone thought they could bring to the table to really help you out. The Game Developers Conference. I love seeing friends and acquaintances at GDC, but holy bleep, is it a bloated and spiritually draining industry event that people pretend to be excited about because it's a work-related excuse to see people. This is, this is one of the softer ones I did. They were rough out there. Kiki Wolfkill. So, I just admire so much. This was actually hard because 343 and yourself have done a ton of stuff. So I don't know if this is exactly your fault, but I tried. 343 Industries made a terrific impression with their first dip into the franchise, but Halo 5 Guardians make them look like one-hit wonders. Oh, man. It's all downhill from here. It's just like nothing. So, of course, I have to do myself. Robin and I worked together, actually, to bring Journey into the world, and after 3 years of difficult conversations, explorations into game development in which we weren't sure how we were going to make it through, battles within our team and with our publisher, here's what one person thought of all that effort. I do not understand the hype for this game. It's not challenging, you don't die, there's barely any story, it's just plain boring, and I was thankful it only went for 2 hours. That's why we made it short. I really love constructive feedback on Flower, which also was one of the first 2 games to ever become a part of the permanent collection at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. Super proud of it. But yeah, I don't know why this game is rated too high. It makes me laugh. This is the dumbest and boringest game I've ever played. Actually, this is not even a game. So, yeah, please, as you continue to hone your craft and build your skills, always remember that those doubts you have, that hurt you might feel, or the nervousness you have about getting criticism for what you have made, we've all felt it too. So just know that it feels like no one else does. We've got your back. And just post some nice comments on the internet every now and again. It really does help. Thanks.
That was great, and a lesson to not feed the trolls. So please do not feed the trolls. Thank you for that, Kelly. And next we are going to listen to Megan Scavo, and she is the president of the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, which is AIAS, an organization that promotes, advances, and recognizes the outstanding achievements in the interactive entertainment industry worldwide. She oversees all of the AIAS initiatives in the video game industry, including the DICE Summit, the industry's premier gathering of creatives and business leaders, as well as the AIAS member-voted DICE Awards show, the DICE Europe Conference, and the AIAS Foundation. And also, we think it's appropriate to point out that the Strong Museum is home to the AIS DICE Awards exhibit, which recognizes the winners of each year's DICE Awards. So please welcome Megan Scavo.
Thank you. All right, well, when I was told the theme was create, I, of course, like Kiki, went into panic mode. I'm the boring person on stage who doesn't make games. I play games. I'm currently playing a very annoying game about a very annoying goose, but I don't make games. But create means different things to different people. And I may not make games, but I create a space in which the creators themselves go and discuss and talk and learn about making games. So I've been responsible for 2 of the most important and biggest events in the game industry for makers, game creators, and that's the Game Developers Conference, GDC. Has over 27,000 people attend every year, people from all areas of the game industry, and DICE Summit, which is the only event on the calendar year for executives and creative leads. Basically, the events I manage have played a pivotal role in not only shaping the larger community, but how we present ourselves to the world. And I've always felt that that was a really big responsibility. Young, aspiring, up-and-coming game developers are watching what happens at our events and our award ceremonies. Media and other industries are paying attention to the image we're portraying. Working developers are expecting to see themselves and their visions represented on our stage. So how do I create an event that is safe and welcoming? How do I create an event that is inspiring? How do I create an event that is representative of our community? And how do I create something that we can be proud of? There are folks probably in this audience who will say that I haven't always been successful at doing that, and I'd be right, because creating something that is successful and that everyone responds positively to is really hard, as we've talked about. Creating is hard. But my goal has always been to just keep trying and to listen, because I feel like listening is the most important thing I can do. What is my audience asking for? And I think it's pretty simple. They ask to feel comfortable, safe, and respected in an event that is vital to their professional growth. So how do I provide that? Lots of ways. The easy ones, checking off boxes. GDC was the first game industry event to launch a code of conduct. So people were on social media talking about how they were harassed at GDC, and so we had to take a stand. You have to set boundaries with strict consequences. We set up a daycare room. I had women telling me that they don't come to GDC because they've got childcare problems and they can't leave because they've got a kid at home. And so it turns out it's really easy to hire an organization that comes in and puts a daycare at your conference. Problem solved. Pronoun identification. There are a growing number of folks who have pronoun preferences, and they'd rather not have to constantly explain to others what that is. So we made ribbons that you can attach to your conference badge. He, him, she, her, they, them. We removed an obstacle that made people uncomfortable. So those were the easy ones, the quick fixes. But the biggest challenge I feel I will forever be tackling is diversity and representation. The game industry is made up of every single type of person imaginable, but you would never know it by looking at our spokespeople. So this is the long game. This is where I hunker down and convince everyone to put in the time and the work, because that's what it's going to take. There's no quick fix. There's no Women in Games luncheon. There's no gay gamers party. There's no Blacks in Games meetup that's going to solve this overnight. As an industry, we need to decide to change this, and I'm in a unique position to help create opportunities for that change. So my path that I've chosen to take to help normalize diversity in the game industry is a long and complicated one. I don't see it as an overnighter. I want to put in the work to fix this. I want to put people on stage talking about the games that they make and not about being an underrepresented person in the industry. It's not as easy as it sounds, trust me. I faced hurdle after hurdle, but I'm not giving up. So if I had a lot of time, I'd go into my thought process about what I'm going to talk about next. But I only have a couple minutes, so I'm just going to outline some of the programs that I've launched in order to get past these hurdles. So first, we launched a scholarship program for underrepresented developers. I started Googling diversity organizations in tech and games and blind emailing them, saying, let me give you 25 all-access passes for free. You just take them and do what you want with them. And my goal was simple. If I can't easily put a diverse roster of speakers on stage, I'm going to flood the audience with diversity so that those people can eventually be speakers on my stage. And in my last year at GDC, we handed out almost $3 million in free passes. Second, I know, and they're still doing it. Second, I, along with Robin Hunicke, who I think is coming after me, launched a program called Amplifying New Voices. This was after the height of Gamergate, when we're like, we have to do something, and we have to do something from within. So this program provides a full day of professional training to 36, don't remember how we came up with that number, but 36 tables of 6, 36 underrepresented early to mid-career developers. So these are not just women, these are any underrepresented developer. We provide professional headshots. We help them rewrite their bios. We do on-camera media training and on-camera speaker training. And the goal is to create the next generation of spokespeople for our games. And these folks want to contribute, but they didn't feel that they had the skills, so we're going to give those skills to them. Lastly, we just decided to be more conscious in our decision-making. All panels had to be diverse. No award ceremonies with just white guy hosts. If we have two similar talk submissions, we take the diverse speaker. And every single decision-making committee, advisory panel, jury, you name it, has to be well represented. It seems obvious, but it's really too easy to fall into normal patterns and just take the people you know. Change takes effort. But I ultimately want to create a space where it feels effortless. I want to create a space where every human being can come to talk about their craft and their inspirations and their dreams and to walk away excited and enthusiastic about the future. So, wish me luck.
I just want to say, Megan, I am a direct person that has benefited from your initiatives. I've gone to GDC for the last 3 years, and as a woman of color and a new game developer, I have definitely seen some of the changes that she has just talked about, and it has been very important. So thank you, Megan. Thank you. So, the next woman, the odds that you recognize her voice because she is well known as maybe Cortana or Dr. Halsey in the Halo video games, or maybe you may have heard her voice as Princess Peach in Toad in the Super Mario series, or maybe you heard her voice as Zoe in the Left 4 Dead games, or maybe you heard her voice as Lena, Medusa, Puck, and Windringer and the online game Dota 2. Or, you know, I don't know. You've heard her voice, though. Please welcome to the stage, Jen Taylor.
Hi, friends. I'm going to do something a little differently. I'd like you to close your eyes. You with me? You got your eyes closed? Close your eyes and imagine an enormous outdoor space. Let's say it is a battlefield at the bottom of a valley. It's laid out in front of you. And you are on a hill above it. And I want you to get specific. I want you to place cannons roaring and warriors screaming and throwing themselves at each other and really, really try to see them. Their armor. Are they on foot? What sort of weapons are they using? What sort of aliens are they fighting? What does it sound like? What does it smell like? Know that it is raining, it is cold, the ground upon which you are standing is sodden and muddy and slippery, and here's something else, you are late to the battle and your guys are losing. Okay, let's step away from that. Shake it off. Keep your eyes closed. Shake it off. Whew, I'm going to go to a different place. Now I'd like you to imagine a small space. Just think about being in a small, enclosed room. How does that feel different? Now let's say it is a cylindrical space with flashing lights and some sort of elevator in the center, and it's very quiet. I want you to feel the temperature in the room. Imagine what the walls feel like. Suddenly, you hear a loud alarm announcing your arrival, and you know you need to get into that elevator. Open your eyes. Welcome to the world of video game acting. That is what I do for my job. How many of you felt a little foolish doing that? You're sitting in the dark, you know, nobody's looking at you. When I was invited to this event, like so many of the women who have spoken before me, I was very honored, and I was very impressed when I saw who else was coming, and then I was a little overwhelmed when I discovered the theme. Because to me, the word create can feel intimidating. It evokes images of greatness, right? The Greeks, the Renaissance, jazz music. So, for all of you who want to be more creative, and especially those of you who want to get involved in the gaming industry, I propose that we use a different word just to take the pressure off, just for the next few minutes. Let's use the word play instead. Somewhat fitting, where we are, because we all know how to play, right? When we were kids, most of what we did was play. And in fact, we were just playing, just now, together, here, in this room. And as a video game actor, when I am playing, I'm usually given a few circumstances, as I did for you, but I have to imagine all the specifics. I put myself inside a new world all the time, and I imagine what it looks like, and feels like, and tastes like. I need to know who I am, where I'm coming from, where I'm going to, what I need, how I'm going to get it in every single moment. I'm playing and creating that specific world for myself so that I can put myself in it, and more importantly, bring you with me. Because this isn't film, and we aren't really in those places, and we don't have sets, and I usually have to ignore that I am actually in a small sound booth by myself, or I'm doing performance capture in a mostly empty warehouse, dressed in spandex, covered in markers, wearing a helmet with the camera attached, surrounded by lights with lots of people staring at me. And there is technical skill and training involved, but anyone can, like we did, take that very first step in imagining and playing, and in so doing, create. Because I know that everyone involved in the creative process of making video games starts with, as I do, play, not just actors. And they may term it differently. They may use different words, but writers play with notions of different worlds and plots and characters to fill them. And artists imagine what those characters, landscapes, weapons, vehicles look like. Animators play with how to make these things move and work, and directors imagine the best way to visualize a scene and a story. So you don't have to be an actor to play in this way. So if it feels a bit intimidating, remember that imagination or play is like a muscle. You gotta build it up. You gotta practice using it, flex it, and give yourself time, because it may seem awkward or childish or silly, but it gets easier, and you feel less silly, and it becomes normal again, like it was when you were a kid. And this imagining and this playing starts to feel less intimidating, less lofty, and suddenly you realize that you are creating. Thank you.
Wow, Jan, you made that sound so accessible and like approachable. Like now I want to be a video game voice actress. So I don't know what I want to be anymore. It's like so many things I've heard today, and there's so many things I can be in the video game industry, and it's not too late for me. So I know that now. So the next woman that I would like to bring to the stage is Robin Hunicke. She's a programmer and artist by training, and she left her PhD research in robotics and artificial intelligence to pursue a career in game design. Like, she left something cool to pursue something cool. So she joined Electronic Arts in 2005, where she worked on The Sims 2, My Sims, and Steven Spielberg's Boom Block series. In 2009, she joined That Game Company as executive producer for the award-winning PlayStation 3 title Journey. Also, she co-founded the game studio Funamina with the goal of building a diverse and inclusive studio that pushes the boundaries of game design and emerging technologies. And a fun fact, in April, Robin appeared on Bravo's Project Runway to promote careers in gaming to girls and other traditionally underserved groups. So please, please give a warm welcome to Robin Hunicke.
Hello, everyone. You might notice that I swapped spots with Kiki Wolfkill because I don't mind going last. So, as the program states, my background is in computer science and artificial intelligence and robotics, and I did pursue a career in it. And when I realized that my future would be building drones, I decided to do something a little bit less different, violent, weird. Wait, I decided to make really beautiful video games. I've never made a game with a gun in it. I dropped out to start working on games, but before I dropped out, I did some other stuff that I wanted to talk about today because I think it's really important to where we're headed for the future of creating. When I started making games, you had to know someone who knew someone who knew someone, and they were all guys, who could get your game, put into some code, and press to a disk, and ship to a store, and put on store shelves. It was incredibly expensive to do these things, and so the barrier to entry to our community was incredibly high. And as I was finishing my PhD, which I was eventually going to drop out of, I started talking to some other strange creatives in our community about how hard it was for me to imagine ever being able to make a real game. What if you could make a game and just make it and put it out there and have people play it? Wouldn't that be so cool? Sounded like a really revolutionary idea at the time. So in 2002, me and about 15 of these friends got together. I was the only woman in the group, and we hosted the very first ever Indie Game Jam, the first game jam on the planet Earth. The idea was to get together over a weekend and spend the weekend coding, and then take the games that we made and put them on a website, which was hosted by Intel, so that people could play the games that we made. They wouldn't be serious, they wouldn't be real, they would be silly and different and just whatever we came up with in a weekend. We wouldn't get a lot of sleep, we would drink a lot of Red Bull, actually it was probably Coke at the time, but we were gonna get it done. It was gonna be a fun thing. What's the worst thing that could happen? None of the games would be playable, none of them would run. It was so fun that we did it the next year, and then the next year, and eventually we started a session at GDC called the Experimental Gameplay Workshop that allowed us to show people the results of this bizarre experimentation. Guess what happened? Within 5 years, the Global Game Jam was founded. I sat on the theme committee for the Global Game Jam, and slowly game jams started happening all over the world. And now, when the Global Game Jam happens, over 83 countries participate in jamming to make games, putting them up on the internet, and letting people play them for free. Let's hear a round of applause for them. That is amazing. And at the same time that this was going on, I'm toiling away on my PhD. I'm realizing that I don't really know anything about game design from a class or from a book. I learned it all by talking to other developers. So I started talking to developers about what would it be like if you could go to school and study video games, like for real, like real video games, not the kind of games we were making, but like the real kind. So I wrote a curriculum with a bunch of friends through the IGDA, and once again, at GDC, we hosted an education summit where developers and educators could get together and talk about this idea of maybe a few people hosting programs where kids could learn how to program and make games. And now there are game design programs all over the world, and many of the game jams that happen in their communities. It's amazing. In fact, I founded my own games program at UC Santa Cruz just 6 years ago, and it's the fastest growing undergraduate major on campus. People really like video games. If you like video games, holler. This is a very roundabout way of saying that so much has changed in our community in the last 20 years, in the last 40 years. And today is a better time to be making games that express your true lived experience than ever before. The tools are better, the communities are more inclusive and more accepting. We are louder and prouder as developers every year, and it's awesome. And when you look at a community like Minecraft or Roblox, and you look at the games they're playing together and then how they make games, and those games become games that other people play, it's an amazing democratization of a creative platform of expression. It's the way that things go. The more people have access, the more people express, the more people have fun. The more people play, the more people create. And every single woman that has been up on the stage talking to you tonight has had a hand in making that change happen. So I want us to shout really loud for all of them. So in my duty as the wrap-up speaker, I made some notes. And I just want to go through some of the amazing wisdom that these women have shared with us tonight. Number one, creativity is messy, but trust over time gets you through almost anything. Our job is really fun, but we only ever stop because we have deadlines. To create, you need to be okay with failures. Hard, frustrating, and scary is a necessary part of making your dreams a reality. But it is easier if you lead well and create an environment of psychological safety, listen to the feedback that you get, and lead with a vision, collaborating with an abundance mindset, embracing the journey of a lifelong learner who can create space for others and do that with generosity. Creating can connect us through that process to communities, identities, and practices of survival and resistance. Our limits inform our capacity to innovate and to find what is arresting, fun, and fabulous in this world, to embrace our inner child and share that child with every other child on the planet, which is all of us. The creative process involves vulnerability, and inclusive, diverse narratives give our audiences a new way to see themselves in our work, which is worth the caring and the courage that it takes to share those new truths. The vulnerability is necessary, and it is real. Even in the face of incredibly unconstructive feedback, i.e., haters hate us because they ain't us. Even though it is very difficult to make everyone happy, and I know this myself from years and years of failing, it is incredibly important to take measurable, concrete steps to embrace the differences that we have so far chosen to ignore and the systems of oppression that we have participated in, however unwillingly. In a sense, the best way to put it is that your voice matters and your imagination matters. In short, every single woman that you have heard from here is doing their part to make change. And as the strong has shown us, women make games. Games make change. And now hopefully each of you has the strength to lend your voice to the effort. Thank you so much.
All right, Robin Hunicke summed that up so well. You forgot to drop the mic, actually. So next time, remember, drop the mic. So this, I don't know about you guys, but this was special for me. Was it special for you? So we're running a little bit behind, but we're going to take some questions from the audience. So I would like to invite all the speakers back on stage.
watches are hard.
Hello. Oh, it does work.
I'm ready for some good questions.
All right, who has questions?
Right here.
I'm loving the Sonic the Hedgehog's t-shirt already.
Yeah, I love it too. Thank you. So,
Much better.
You guys are all awesome. Thank you so much for coming here. I'm sure we all appreciate it. I didn't expect to even get to the deepest reaches of gaming as Reader Rabbit. Like, that goes back to literally when I was a toddler. Oh, yeah. You guys know that the Rochester Institute of Technology is nearby. You know, for those of you who haven't been there, I really recommend stopping by. We could use the star power and all the motivation. But
The question.
Question.
Yeah, the question. I didn't mean to.
We blew his
advertise.
mind.
Well.
Just a comment is fine.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Oh, thank you for asking. So, I'm a film and animation student concentrating in 2D animation. It's been a lot of learning these past 4 years. I'm a senior right now. My animatic is due in 2 days. Once I'm done here, I gotta get back to working on it. But
Make sure you get some sleep.
Oh, actually,
It really helps, actually.
I did get some last night.
Great.
And it does. It does. But that's going really well, and you know, I love video games too. In fact, going to RIT, it was, you know, between game design or animation. I chose animation, and I like where it's going, and I'm excited to where that could lead to in video games. So I guess if there's a question, it would be, where can animation be easily substantially accessible in the video game industry, especially from a starter's perspective?
What do you mean by accessible? You mean like accessibility, or how do you get in?
He's like asking. He's asking the breaking question.
I'm just graduating, you know. How do
Yeah,
I?
he wants to. How does he get a job? It's a tiny question. I mean, it's a really small one. It means nothing to him. Clearly.
I'm actually going to be at RIT tomorrow, hopefully checking it
yeah.
out. We
Thank
actually
you
have
all
some
are.
great alumni from RIT, so that's why I wanted
awesome.
to come over and check it out and stuff. But yeah, I was going to say, I mean, for us at least, when we're looking for animators, a lot of it really comes down to having a good portfolio. You've probably heard. We separate animation into two categories. One is like cinematic, you know, which is probably why you're doing an animatic right now. And then there's like gameplay animation. So I think depending on where you want to go, those are the two ways I would gear my portfolio. And if you're doing animation for games, just know that those are normally like clips, like run cycles and jumping, things like that. That seem kind of boring. Melee moves if you're working on Spider-Man. And then if you're working on animatics or cinematics, it's always about the storytelling. So those are the two things that we look for in an animation portfolio.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
All right, I think we have one back here.
Okay, I have two questions. They're completely opposite from each other. The first I want to say thank you for all your creativity.
Very inspiring. On this stage, speaking about your process. I am a creator in the world of choreography. I was on Broadway for 10 years, and I went to further the discussion of race-related relations in America through my choreography. So I actually created a foundation called Create a Space Now organization. And I came here specifically tonight because I
I don't have a kid, but I work with a couple of people at UC Santa Cruz, new female faculty in my division that are amazing, A.M. Dark and Misha Cardenas. They both do interesting work at the intersection of gender and race studies, as well as personal expression and performance with VR and AR. So I can introduce you to the two of them, and I'm sure they would be happy to introduce you to other women in this space. Also, I have a friend who's in theater, Amy Ginther, who does autobiographical theater and does some interactive there. So I think the best place to get started is to look at academic programs or people that are on the cutting edge of the art scene in those kinds of communities where performance is blending into gaming. And I'm happy to talk to you about it after.
There's also, just for the heck of it, there's a Facebook group, Blacks in Games, Blacks
great.
in Gaming. Can you hear me? That I would go to. It's Blacks in Gaming. It's a Facebook group, and they're very active.
They're awesome.
They're awesome.
I was also thinking, to Robin's point, like Sarah Bryn at Meow Wolf,
Yeah, she's great.
Punch Drunk, who's based in London but did the Sleep No More production, which is in New York. There's a lot of intersection, really cool, because my background is in experimental theater, and seeing it like converge with now my current work in augmented reality. It's like a really cool time for thinking about the things that you're thinking about.
Yeah, it's ideal.
Yeah, as a mom in games, it's there's, I guess, let's say two points. One is certainly I feel at an advantage because I am a designer. I'm very familiar with vocabulary. I think fundamentally it's that like understanding of what I think is good and valuable, or like be able to communicate with my kids as they get older is an advantage. And there's not a great resource for passing that on. That's something I think about. But the second thing is there's an element of just any media and our creativity and sort of what Jen was talking about earlier is like our sort of default state of play with one another. And like what they think of with kids is often imaginative play is an outlet for the things that are going on in their head. So if they're consuming a lot of media, that will sort of be the output of that imagination. Whereas if they're maybe it's balanced or not as much, then it sort of holds that space for allowing them to process like whatever else is going on in their lives. That becomes like the way they go through imagination. But yeah.
So I had.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Can I? So I just want to like promote this event because it was mind blowing for me. I went to Games for Change, which is like primarily white, and I'm white passing. And so I can like move through certain spaces and just let that be, if that's what I need to do to be safe. And what was amazing to me to see was that they also now have an XR AR event that directly follows Games for Change. And it changed. It went from predominantly white to very diverse within a matter of hours based on who was registering for those events. And it was an incredible thing to see. And to come to an event, then you have an opportunity to see all of this different kind of work and make connections in person. And so I highly recommend checking that event out.
Yeah, you can also apply for Oculus Launchpad, which is similarly focused. Am, who is the faculty I mentioned earlier, I met her at Launchpad. So, and I spoke at Launchpad and I spoke at that event. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
I want to add something for your.
Yeah. I was going to say in 2009, I had the exact same question that you did. And as a black woman, for the last 10 years, I've basically made a list of all of those resources that we've used over the past decade. We've also developed our own technology where I work with a company called Live CGI, where we use motion capture suits to puppeteer CGI avatars live in real time. So we have had dancers actually use it as a form of expression in that medium through the Unreal Engine. So I can just give you that list of people that we have already put together, and I can tell you about the technology that we're working on.
And I want to add a little about your own child and the age, because none of us, I think, have spoken of that. I have some thoughts. One is, when they're really little, they use their whole hand, not a pointer finger. That's like about age 3. And it's okay, but you need software that goes with that. And a machine is just, it just can carry so many different things. So if it's about killing and nastiness, of course you don't want a little child near it. So you don't think of it as when do you use a computer, but what's appropriate for the child. And there's some organizations that make recommendations about that, but they haven't really done research on it. They have opinions. The pediatrician that wrote the pediatrician's guidelines that millions of families follow told me there was no evidence. Anyway, so use your own instincts as a parent, and think not of the computer, but what it's doing. And you wouldn't put horrendous music or nasty food. You make it something beautiful that you think is really fun and interesting, especially if they can respond.
But also don't forget that most of us spent our childhoods in arcades and we turned out okay.
Yeah.
Hello, is working? Hi. I'm also a student at RIT in Game Design and Development, second year. I currently love all aspects of games, and this could be related to your favorite game or any game you like, but what's your favorite / best mechanic that you've seen in games, in your games that you've made or any other games?
I love the rewind mechanic in Prince of Persia. It wasn't the first game that did it, and it's not the last game that did it, like John Blow's game, Braid, used it, but made it infinite. But I thought that the ability to rewind and redo stuff just felt really badass.
There's a mobile game called Gorogoa that has sort of extraordinary use of layered 2D animation and really just beautifully illustrated art, and sort of the puzzle solving that comes from the dynamics of moving the frames, and the storytelling through it is super unique and amazing.
And he hand rotoscoped every single frame of that game.
We've got a question from some of our users that are watching on Twitch. Everybody who's watching, thank you so much for tuning in. So one of the questions that we have is, how do you wish to motivate the next generation of female leaders?
Giving them money.
I think is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. I spoke a little bit about this, but I think a big point of motivation for young females thinking about entering the industry is just seeing themselves represented in the games. I feel like we're in this vicious cycle where if you don't see yourself in the games, you're not going to be passionate about it, and this industry is so passion driven, and if you're not feeling that connection, then you're not going to be there. There's less of us there making content that is inclusive, and it just continues and continues. And so, all of us up here and you in the future have this responsibility to make sure that we're creating inclusive casts of characters, and we're really thinking about everyone, so we're inviting them in.
I tend to focus on sort of what I can do personally, and that tends to be around making my own company a great place for women to work, and bringing women in who may not have thought of being in games before. At Congregate, we hired a lot of community managers and a lot of people straight out of our community and let them work from home. And we got up to around about 40–45% female. And so it's not just sort of bringing women into the industry, it is making the environment they're in one they want to stay in. And focusing on that. So that's sort of how I do it.
Yeah, Phenomena is 55% non-cis white male. We try to make our diversity profile include cis, trans, queer, people of color, people from different communities, people that were raised outside the United States, people that don't speak English as a first language. We've really tried to make diversity a huge practice. And I think that one of the biggest things that comes from building a community, if you can build a game that builds a community, is that you can recruit from it. My first job, which was on The Sims 2, the company was over 50% female because they recruited from their community.
And then I've been a part of a program called Native Girls Code. There are a lot of other workshops that I've done for indigenous game development, and one thing out of that program is that actually a lot of them started informing the curriculum. So I think it's really important for us to have reciprocity with the next generations about what is it that they want to do. And a lot of them are going in the direction of art and animation, and I think it is really vital for us to validate that as an important role in game development, and that does connect very closely to design and mechanics and code, and so that you as an artist are a very huge and important proponent of game development.
I know we're running late, but do we have time for one more? All right.
Okay, imagine yourself 10 years ago. What is one sentence of encouragement you would tell yourself based on your current experience?
Don't let the bastards get you down.
I was gonna say, keep going. They'll eventually take you seriously. But she said it much better.
My very wonderful husband said, "Remember, it's for the children," when things were really terrible.
I have a thought. It's sort of, you know, there's been times where I've been afraid and, you know, took that step and I didn't die. So you're not going to die. Just try it. Keep on trying.
Yeah, I would actually add to that because I've had that similar feeling. You'll actually come out better and stronger.
And you'll meet a lot of lovely people along the way.
Well, I mean, do any of you other women have any other statements to kind of sum up what you would tell yourself 10 years ago?
I was just going to reemphasize what everyone said, but it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. In fact, that's what you should do. That's the thing I notice a lot with a lot of new grads now, and I keep saying maybe it's because of the economy. I don't know why, but it feels like they're so stressed out about making the right move, finding the right job, making the right decisions, and like, none of us here have succeeded on our first try, and you probably saw that tonight. So don't put that kind of pressure on yourself. You should be failing and making mistakes. That's how you learn.
Yeah. Well, I would like to thank each and every one of you ladies for contributing and impacting the game industry as you have, and impacting the people who are looking up to you and playing your games and wondering how they too can be a part of this space. Also, like the fact that you're sharing your experiences in such a human way not only has resonated with me, but I'm pretty sure has resonated with a lot of the people who are watching. So thank you for taking the time, and thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And everyone, please join us for a tour of the Women in Games exhibit with our curator, Shannon Simons. And please join us in the atrium for a reception and gameplay. And thank you to everybody for being here. Keisha, thank you to you too.